Good evening and welcome to the State Court's Town Hall on Evictions and Debt Collection. My name is Lorena Rifo Jensen and I will be your moderator for the night. First of all, I would like to thank our partners, community partners who have made this possible. The Utah Division of Multicultural Affairs, the State of Utah, the Utah State Court, People's Legal Aid, Utah Community Action, Inclusiva Collective, and the Multicultural Advisory Committee for the State of Utah, COVID-19 response. The Utah Court's Town Hall was initiated to provide updates and information to the community on important topics as they relate to COVID-19 and the disaster response. Today, we're going to focus on identifying resources relating to issues of eviction and debt collection. Our panelists, Mr. Daybell, Heather Lester, and Mr. Player will provide insight for all members in the community to be aware of all the resources and options pertaining to eviction and debt collection. For some housekeeping instructions, guests can see the presenters and you can ask questions on our question and answers box on Zoom or comment on Facebook Live. We would love to hear your questions. And of course, we want to thank again everyone that's participating tonight and the entire team behind this virtual town hall. And big thanks to our panelists for joining us. We will start tonight with our Jeff Daybell, my apologies, with the Utah Legal Clinic's People's Legal Aid. And Jeff Daybell is the Executive Director and Senior Attorney at the People's Legal Aid. He primarily focuses his practice on eviction and debt collection defense. Jeff also works as the staff attorney for the Access to Justice Office at the Utah State Bar. And in this capacity, he manages 2 self-represented party calendars in the 3rd District Courts. Jeff is a passionate advocate for balanced tenants' rights and access to the courts. He graduated from the S.J. Quinney College of Law at the University of Utah and the University of Nevada, Las Vegas for his undergraduate degree in accounting. And with that, we'll turn the time to Jeff to tell us everything he knows about eviction. So thank you so much, Jeff, for being with us.
Thanks, Lorena, for that introduction. I know you don't have enough time for me to tell you everything I want to say about eviction, but I hope I can give you a couple of good resources and pointers for dealing with an eviction process in the next little bit. I think there is a slide, if I could get the next slide up. I just want to go over a couple of options, some of the basic steps in eviction and some of those options that you have as you go through those options. The first thing I want to talk about though is I think we've all heard the phrase that bad news doesn't get better with time, and it's so true with eviction. If you're anticipating that you're not going to make the rent for September, you should start looking for resources today. Don't wait until the landlord gives you an eviction notice to start looking, because it's possible that we can get ahead of it and just avoid the issue altogether. Today you'll hear from a couple of my colleagues with the Self-Help Center at the state courts and with Utah Community Action, and both are wonderful resources to be able to get some information on where you can start looking for resources, or you can contact us and we can try to help you there. So the first step in an eviction is done through an eviction notice. This notice isn't like a regular court notice. It can be just taped to your door. A lot of folks when they get these notices, might not pay a lot of attention to them because it's pretty common for apartment complexes and other rental situations for landlords to just put notices on the door about random things. But you definitely need to pay attention to an eviction notice, because it will give you a few options that you have to make a pretty quick decision about which route you're going to take. So at the stage when you get if you get an eviction notice, you should immediately reach out for assistance and to try to find resources that are available to you. There are a lot right now that are available to almost everyone. The same day you get the eviction notice, you should reach out to try to get assistance. The second call you should make is to your landlord to see if there is a way that you can negotiate or enter into a deferral agreement if you're unable to come up with the amount that they're seeking on the eviction notice. But one thing I would say is, if you disagree with the amount of money owed on the eviction notice, but you want to stay in your apartment, I would encourage you to pay the full amount on the eviction notice, and then you can always seek that money back that you don't think you owe later. But if you don't pay the full amount that's listed on the eviction notice, and that is a requirement, they have to give you the opportunity to pay, if they're trying to evict you for not having paid your rent, they have to give you the opportunity to pay that rent. And in order to do so, they have to tell you the exact amount that is owed so that you can sort of save that lease. The legal term is save the lease from forfeiture, but really it's just so that you can come current and move on without having to proceed to court. So if the amount is something that you disagree with, I would encourage you to still pay it so that you can just avoid going to court where the costs will dramatically increase. And then, you can give us a call or Utah Legal Services a call, and we can sort of give you a consultation on how you could dispute the amount of money that you owe or the amount of money that you've paid. So when you get your eviction notice, you really have like three choices. You can pay the amount that's owed, and I'm going to curtail most of my advice tonight for eviction notices based on non-payment of rent, because that's the majority of the cases that we're seeing right now. There are different types of eviction notices, but this is sort of specific to not having paid rent. So your three options are to pay the rent, and then you can stay in your apartment or your rental or whatever the property agreement is. Or you can move out. You can completely move out of the property within 3 business days. Or you can stay, and that will put you into a situation where the landlord is likely to file a lawsuit against you to physically evict you from the property. So the landlord can't just, on their own decide that they are going to lock you out. They have to go through a formal court process, which requires personal service, and it's a very quick process, but it's one that they have to go through in order to get you physically removed from the property. And that is the second stage of the eviction process. So there is like an official summons and complaint that has to be served on you. And the advice here is you need to respond to it. Even if you don't think that you have any defenses to it, if it's really just you don't have the money to pay the rent, you still need to respond to the complaint. And Nathaniel Player from the courts will present later, and he can show you the process for finding out how to do that on your own, or you can contact People's Legal Aid or Utah Legal Services, and we can also help you through that process and potentially even take your case for free. So if you don't file the answer, which has to be done in a very short period of time, within 3 days, it's possible that you could get an order for an immediate eviction, and the landlord would also potentially get just an automatic order for the costs and attorney's fees and court costs. So even if you don't feel like you have a defense, I encourage you to file an answer. If you file an answer, it's likely that the landlord will request what's called an occupancy hearing. And at that occupancy hearing, the court will just want to know if the eviction was legal. So if you have some defense, like if you really have paid rent, that's a great defense, right? They can't bring an action like this if you are caught up on rent. But this will be your opportunity to tell the court why you should be able to stay in the property. I encourage you to seek legal counsel for that. People's Legal Aid and Utah Legal Services are two entities that can help you without cost to you. But if you're able to, you could also hire a private attorney. But I would encourage you to at least get a consultation before the occupancy hearing so that you know what type of evidence that you should bring in, and the types of sort of procedure that you need to follow before the occupancy hearing so that you could even bring in that evidence. Attending the hearing could potentially result, or not attending the hearing will definitely result in your eviction from your home. Attending the hearing may, some courts right now, depending on your circumstances, are giving people more time in their place. So it's very important that you attend. If we go to the next slide, I just want to wrap up on some basic tips for the eviction process overall. For non-payment, there are some provisions that the CARES Act, a federal law that has benefited a lot of people over the past 6 or 7 months. They have a different period of time. So it's possibly 30 days if the property qualifies. Unfortunately, it's not if the individual qualifies. The property has to qualify, and then it forces the landlord to give a different eviction notice. But if your property didn't qualify, then you'll have 3 business days to make that choice of either pay your rent, move out, or stay. And all 3 of those have consequences, and we'd encourage you to reach out for help the second that you get the notice, so we can help you make the best decision that's going to be most beneficial to you and your family. There are other types of eviction notices that you may receive. Like there's a nuisance, a criminal nuisance eviction. There's a notice for, if they're just going to terminate your lease because you've gotten to the end of your lease agreement. Those are calendar days. So it's very possible that you have a very short period of time to speak or seek counsel to discuss your options with those. So again, please just reach out for a consultation or to talk with the mediator to see if there's something that we can do to help you work that case. A lot of the people that we work with complain that they were not given the eviction notice personally. An eviction notice can just be taped to your door. There are some requirements that the landlord is supposed to knock first, but as long as the eviction notice is taped to the door or in a conspicuous place is how it's phrased in the law, that is likely going to qualify as proper notice of an eviction. So if you're using that as your basis, I would encourage you to still reach out for assistance because it's likely that will qualify. And then just the last 3 things that I would focus on at every stage in the eviction process is try to negotiate with your landlord. If you are on unemployment or if you have rental assistance that Heather Lester will talk about here in just a minute from Utah Community Action, or if you have a housing voucher, if you have some sort of resource, the landlords will be interested in negotiating with you. So once you come up with an agreement, if you're able to come up with an agreement, please write it down, follow it up in an email if it's just over the phone, and say, Mr. or Mrs. Landlord, this is what I think was the basis of our agreement. If it's correct, you don't have to respond to this. Having some sort of evidence that we can show the court that you had an agreement after the eviction notice will be especially good evidence when we're trying to fight for you. So just as a final tip, please reach out for help. I think that will be the theme that you'll see through this town hall, is that it's just easier to get you into resources as if we know about your situation quicker. And
Jeff,
yeah.
could I interrupt you for 1 second? What would be the best number for people to reach you? I love that you said ask for help. When in doubt, ask for help. What is the best number for people to reach out to you?
So people can reach out to us directly at 801-477-6975. And we have people that speak, obviously, English, Spanish, Korean, and German. And if we don't have the ability to speak with you directly for whatever language issue, we have resources to be able to reach out to our sister agencies to be able to find someone that can help us communicate. So the quicker you can reach out, the better. And as I think you'll also see throughout this, all the agencies are sort of working together right now. So if ours isn't the right agency to help you, we will help you get placed with the right agency. And that will be the same for Utah Community Action and with the courts.
Wonderful. We have a few questions for you. I want to make sure that we get to those. The first question is, does People Legal Aid have translation interpretation services for non-English speakers? I think you already answered that by telling us that Korean, German, and Spanish, and obviously English is actually spoken at your organization. Is that correct?
That's correct. And if someone is just interested in fighting their case on their own, we're happy to just help them interpret or get their answers written on the court forms. And I think Nathaniel Player will show you how to access those. Thank
you. The second question is, what is the process for contacting a lawyer to help you with a case? And that goes back to the phone number. We would love for you to give us that number again to make sure that our audience has that as a resource.
Sure. The best way is just to call our intake line, and they will schedule a time for you to meet with an attorney. All our meetings are done over the phone, so it can be done almost according to your schedule. But the phone number you can reach us at is 801-477-6975.
Thank you so much. Last question is, what are the costs associated with your services?
So we provide our service for free for the folks that we represent. There are some costs, and our attorneys will discuss those with you depending on the choices that you make going through the eviction process. Because if you really want to take your case all the way through a trial, you won't have to pay us anything. But if we lose, it's possible that you'll have increased attorney's fees from the other side to pay. So there won't be any costs associated with our representation, but we will walk you through the decision-making process at each stage of the eviction, just so that you're aware of what your liability may be, depending on how the court rules.
There was something that you shared with us in our previous Spanish virtual town hall on the same topic, and that was 211. You mentioned earlier that 211 is a great resource, and if people forget the number you gave us just now, they can always reach out to 211 and they can connect you. They can connect that individual to resources such as your People's Legal Aid and other resources. Is that correct?
Yep, that's right. They are familiar with all of the resources in the state and can provide direct referrals to the two legal aid agencies that are providing representation right now are Utah Legal Services and People's Legal Aid. And then depending on the county that you live in, there are different agencies that can help with rental assistance. So they're a good and easy number to remember, much easier than our number to remember.
Thank you so much, Jeff. And I want to be thoughtful of everyone's time. So we're going to start moving to our next presenter, Mr. Player. And basically, this is the director of the Utah State Court Self-Help Center. I'm going too fast. I'm eating my own words. And then let me give you a little bit of background about our great presenter. He is the director of the Utah State Court Self-Help Center, which provides free legal help and information to thousands of people trying to navigate the Utah legal system. He has served on numerous committees working to increase access to justice for the people of Utah within the court system. And as a part of the larger, and as a part of the larger legal community. Prior to joining the courts, he represented low-income tenants facing eviction for 7 years in San Francisco and Washington, D.C. As the supervising attorney of a legal clinic in San Francisco, he oversaw the litigation of hundreds of eviction cases, managed 11 attorneys, and helped to establish a trial program, filling a gap in the city's legal services, filling a gap in the city's legal services, excuse me. He also managed data collection efforts to document the impact of the program and to articulate the need for more funding for trial work. He has also supervised the drafting of 2 data-driven reports on the state of evictions in San Francisco, which were instrumental in passing amendments to the city's tenants protection. With that introduction, I will turn the time to Mr. Player to inform us of all the wonderful resources that we have at the Utah State Court system.
Thank you, Lorena. I appreciate the opportunity to present, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk with everybody. Thank you. I'm the director of the Utah State Court Self-Help Center. It's a free resource. I'll talk about it. The court does care a lot about helping people access the legal system, about making sure people do access the courts. There are a lot of resources we have, so I'd like to show some of those today, and that's what my presentation will focus on. So I'm just going to share my screen real quick. I'm going to show you what we have online. Most of our resources are available online. The first resource I want to show you is the Utah Court's main webpage. It's utcourts.gov. This is the main website. If you go to utcourts.gov, this is where you'll land. There's lots of information here, and if you click where it says all self-help resources, then you'll be on this page where there is a fair amount of information on lots of different topics. We're going to focus on eviction today, but there's lots of other resources here for numerous topics that people might be facing. If you're going through eviction, you can click here where it says eviction, and you can read information about what's going on right now with COVID-19. Jeff mentioned the federal law. It's called the CARES Act. That does provide some extra time for people facing eviction. This has specifics on it. And Jeff mentioned that you might be covered under the CARES Act. If you're not sure if you're covered, you could use these links here to look up your property and see if you might be covered. These links don't cover every single property that's under the CARES Act, but they cover most of them. So it could be a good place to look to see what, whether you're covered under the CARES Act and what your rights are. On this page, there's also just general information about eviction. What we have here is information that says evicting somebody without a court order is illegal. So a landlord cannot just change the locks or throw you out. They have to follow the court process. Jeff mentioned some of the processes involved in some of the steps in an eviction case. There's a roadmap or a flow chart here that talks about evictions. So Jeff mentioned the first step is a notice. If you move out after you receive a notice, then that's the end of it. If you do not move out after you receive a notice, then the landlord will serve a summons and complaint on you if you're facing eviction, and you can file what's called an answer. If you don't file the answer, you lose the case and you get evicted pretty quickly. But if you do file an answer, there's a chance to have an occupancy hearing. The answer protects your rights and allows you to continue down the process. So the flowchart can help you understand what's going on, help you understand what comes next. There's lots of information here about notices and how that works, court processes, and at the very bottom of this page, there's information on how to file an answer. And it says for the tenant to use OCAP. OCAP stands for Online Court Assistance Program. It's a system that you can use to prepare an answer. If you're filing an answer, it's free to use the system. It requires you to have a computer and an email address. If you say you need an account, it will walk you through the steps. You have to have meet these technical requirements. If you do, you click OK. And it will say, are you new to this site over here? You will click next, and then you will complete this information here. Once you complete that information, OCAP will send you an email asking you to confirm your registration. Once you do that, you can log into the system here. When you log into OCAP, yours will look different than mine. Yours won't have anything over here on this side of the screen. It will just have start new interview and options here. There's one specifically for tenant. It says tenant, respond to eviction case. And you can use this to prepare paperwork to file an answer in your eviction case. Again, that's the paperwork that lets the court know you disagree with what the landlord is saying in the eviction case. Once you have all this filled out, OCAP will prepare a series of PDFs that you can use to file with the court. Right now, because of the pandemic, the court is accepting email filing of these documents, and I'll show you how to do that. If I go back to the court's homepage, there's information up here at the top regarding the pandemic. And then if I scroll down here, there's information on which courthouses are open, what's going on. All the courthouses are open, but they're encouraging people to stay home to access services remotely. So you can access services remotely. There's information about filing your documents by email. And if you have an existing case, you can click this link. There's instructions here on how to proceed with filing the documents by email. And depending on your court, there's an email address you use. So you attach the documents, you upload them, you include the information required here, and send that to the court. That gets your documents filed. If you don't have email or don't have access to a computer, but maybe your friend does, you can still file an answer in your case. If I go back to this main self-help page, you can click here where it says answering a complaint or petition. And if you scroll down to the bottom, there's information here on all sorts of aspects of filing an answer. There's a specific court form called answer. And you can fill that out. You put your information here. This information will come from the court papers that you receive from the landlord. And then there are three options. You either agree and you note the numbered paragraphs in the complaint that you received that you agree with. Then there are paragraphs that you will disagree with. So you'll write the numbered paragraphs you disagree with. And then if you don't know, if there's not enough information, you'll write the numbers you don't know what to think about. If you want to add more information, you can do that here. If you want to supplement anything with an affirmative defense, you can do that here. Again, you would use the same process to email that, or you can walk that to the court. You can bring that to the courthouse directly. In addition to the resources we have online, information on OCAP and the eviction process, you can use the court self-help resources to contact my office at the Self-Help Center. If I scroll down to the bottom of this page, here's information about the Self-Help Center. You can call us, text us, or email us, and our contact information is here. Most people call us. This is the number to call. We're open Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. Our service is totally free. The first question we will ask if you contact us is, how can I help? I don't care about how much money you do or don't make. I don't care about your immigration status. I just want to help. So you call us at this number, you text us at this number, or you email us at this email, selfhelp@utcourts.gov. Either way you contact us is fine. It's totally free. The courts are here to help. The Self-Help Center can provide you information, help in understanding what's going on with your case, explain options going forward, and connect you with resources, whether that's a website or an agency like Jeff Daybell's People's Legal Aid. We're available to help in any language, so we speak Spanish, so you can contact us directly. If you don't speak English, there's a Spanish option and we'll talk to you in Spanish. If you need help in another language, the court will provide interpreter services free of charge. All of our services are totally free. We're not providing legal advice. We're not your lawyers or representing you, but we're doing our best to help you represent yourself in your case. In addition to that, if you need other help, we can connect you with other resources. There's information here about finding legal help. And if I click on this, there's lots of information on this page about finding legal help, how to find a lawyer. There's information about when you get a free lawyer. You do not get a free lawyer in an eviction or debt collection case, but there are options. There are agencies, legal clinics that provide help. So the self-help center is here. The courts are here to help as much as we can.
Thank you so much for that incredible presentation and all the resources that are out there to guide individuals and community members who may need this guidance. So thank you so much. I do have a few questions that have been brought to my attention. And the number one question that I'm looking at right now is, who is eligible for the resources from the Self-Help Center? And I know you touched on this, but I think it's great that, you know, we can repeat that, you know, who can come to you guys for self-help?
Yeah, I'm glad to answer it. Anybody can access our services. Our services are totally free. They're available across the state to anyone who needs help, regardless of income, regardless of immigration status, regardless of which language you speak. Our services are totally free and available to everyone.
And then one other question that's come up, if an individual status is undocumented, or you have a family of mixed status, which are many members of our community, you know, can they receive assistance? Can these individuals and family members receive assistance from your program?
Absolutely. We don't ask any question about citizenship status or whether someone has legal documentation. That is not something that the state courts care about at all. So if you need help from the Self-Help Center, it will not even be a question that comes up. We won't ask that question. And when you proceed through your court case, the court in an eviction or debt collection case does not ask about that either. So you can be all undocumented. You can have people who have documentation and who don't. You can have documentation. It doesn't matter.
So you're there to help and to answer questions. And again, you did show us earlier that people can call you. Can they also email you if they have questions? Is there a general email address as well?
Yeah, so they can call us at 888-683-0009, or they can email us at selfhelp@utcourts.gov.
Wonderful. And I think those resources are going to be shared at the end with our audience. So if you didn't write those numbers down or email down as quickly, usually I'm pretty slow, you can get that information towards the end after the presentation. Thank you so much for sharing all the resources that we have available through our Utah State Court. The self-help program it's a great resource for all of us.
Thank you, Lorena.
Yeah, thank you. And with that, we're going to go to our next presenter. And this is with Community Action, Utah Community Action. And we're going to be hearing from Heather Lester. Heather is currently serving as the landlord-tenant mediator with Utah Community Action. She has worked in this position for over 4 years, and which also has included volunteer work in and outside of Salt Lake County. Heather primarily assists with landlord-tenant de-escalations and negotiation relating to deposits, extensions, payment arrangement, fee waivers, Utah fit premise issues, resource referrals, nuisance, and fair housing issue. She has also dedicated a portion of her time to tenant education for internal clients, community agency referral, course services, and other agencies. In addition, Heather attends occupancy hearings for file eviction within the court system to offer mediation services as needed. Heather is very passionate about the practice and need for mediation advocacy, and facilitation and correlation with all housing-related matters in Utah. Heather graduated from Creighton University School of Law, the Warner Institute Negotiation and Dispute Resolution, with an emphasis in organizational development. I mean, we just have incredible presenters today. We're very fortunate. During her time at Creighton, she gravitated and focused her efforts in the areas of social services, access to justice, and online dispute resolution. Without further embarrassing Heather with all her accomplishments and how fortunate we are to hear from her today, I'm just going to turn the time to her so she can share her experience and wealth of information. Thank you, Heather, for joining us today.
Yes, thank you so much. That was an awesome introduction. I'm definitely happy to be here. It's kind of weird when you hear things about yourself, but
yeah.
Yeah, I'm listening to my colleagues obviously speak about all these important things and trying to figure out what I can really drive home. I know that a lot of my presentation was going to be circulated around resources, obviously, Utah Community Action, the different community actions throughout the state. So I want to focus kind of on that, and then also, gravitate towards mediation, how that works with folks and also works within the community and the counter agencies as well. So there's a couple slides that we have here. Thank you for putting that one up. So just initially talking about Utah Community Action. Utah Community Action specifically goes from Salt Lake County, and Tooele, but at the same time, there's also community action partnerships that are throughout the state of Utah as well. So it doesn't mean that you can't still get the same resources, you can't get the same customer service, if you will, but different counties do different things. But especially when you think of COVID and all the other information we've already gotten at this point, it's kind of interesting to see, well, where is the rental assistance at, or where are the resources at, or how can I get legal assistance, or what happens. So just understand that Utah Community Action, if you do happen to be within Salt Lake County or Tooele, then obviously Utah Community Action and the phone numbers you're going to get here will go for that agency, but they're again statewide, so those numbers can be produced as well. So understanding how community action works, not just Utah Community Action, but the resources that are out there for rental assistance programs. So there's been a lot of talk about rental assistance. There's been deposit assistance discussions, obviously COVID affected type of grants, just housing resources in general, deposits. Some agencies actually have a mortgage assistance grant. So there's a lot of different things out there, and it's the main thing, especially echoing Jeff, excuse me, is going back to 211. So it's not just that Utah Community Action can solve all of your issues, but at the same time, 211 has a entirely huge pulse on every resource that's within the state of Utah. So 211 is the place to start, number one, figuring out what your situations are. 211 is accessible, obviously by dialing, definitely online, and even texting. I'm a huge fan of 211 online because I usually go to a situation with more than one problem, right? So I'm trying to figure out all the different places that can help me with all my different needs. So just understanding 211 is a good go-to. They will also refer you to mediation. They will refer you to rental assistance associations. They'll refer you to legal assistance places like, People's Legal Aid, Utah Legal Services. So just echoing that, I won't obviously drive that home too much, but that's pretty much where I would start, okay? So understanding eviction is huge. Eviction is quick. Eviction is detrimental at times because it leaves an impact. So there's always debt collection. There's a bunch of issues that happen that relate to housing. I mean, healthcare, housing, education, student mobility, all these different issues that go back to retaining your home, especially within a pandemic. So there's been an extra thought and extra funds and extra efforts put into this crisis time right now with the pandemic. So reaching out to resources, again, here's the slide. You'll see it here on the screen. Utah Community Action has all 6 of these different programs. Mediation specifically is housed within housing case management and housing. but it is, I just have to make sure that it's a clarity, because mediation is separate than case management. Case management is where you'll work with the case manager, work through funds, potentially to stabilize your housing, potential deposit assistance. Our case managers are absolutely phenomenal. They're very knowledgeable. The intake folks that you'll reach out to at that number right there on the screen, it's 801-359-2444. That is our overall call center intake assessment line. So anything that comes down to needs, as Jeff mentioned, you get a notice, you may before you even get a notice, have the ability to call and try and reach out and get rental assistance before eviction notices actually happen. So getting this assessment and intake done, you'll talk with a case manager or an intake person that will go through the qualifications for what potential grants are there. So understanding definitely COVID, all of the information you've gotten tonight, I'm sure has definitely filled up your brain, and people, you can't write fast enough, I'm sure, to figure out where to go and what to do. But the main thing is reach out. I mean, the whole point is reach out early, reach out often. And if you've ever heard me talk before, and I'm sure you'll probably hear me talk again, the main thing is reach out early, because the earlier that you can get communication, the earlier that you can get something. I don't care if it's an agreement or an arrangement or a partial stipulation, whatever it looks like with your landlord before you get the notice, or when you get the notice, it's going to make the representation and the situation more feasible and more flexible to get stabilization. Okay, so I'm definitely kind of all over the place, I know, but the main thing is with mediation, when I'm able to intercede, so mediation does not represent you as a tenant. It doesn't represent the landlord as the landlord. It represents the situation. And that's why I'm so passionate about mediation, because number one, with client services or any kind of rental assistance program, whether it's Utah Community Action or another, mediation can kind of float in between to help facilitate communication, to help stabilize. So if your landlord's not answering your phone calls or isn't understanding what you're saying, and there's a breakdown of communication, the landlord-tenant relationship has been severed, it's easier for a mediator to do these things rather than a lawyer that you've retained, or someone that, obviously with People's Legal Aid, they're going to look out for your interests because you're their client. And so I work very heavily with Utah Legal Services, People's Legal Aid, because I'm able to do both sides. And so that's the flexibility. I'm maybe beating that to death because people sometimes don't understand mediation and the reason for it. But
Heather, could
yes.
in fact, one of our questions relates specifically to that. And that question is, what does the tenant-landlord mediation really mean?
Right.
So maybe you can walk us through that.
Yes, I'll actually get more on point, right? So the main thing is it's a neutral based presence. I, as a mediator, could intercede with payment arrangements, or discuss potentially what happened with a nuisance, or if there are grant funds in process, then we can basically confirm that arrangements or stipulations or the court filing may or may not have been done. It's basically just another way to communicate more clearly, more efficiently, and to help have that extra person to make the situation less damaging, or less basically crisis management, if you will. So
if you had a tenant and those relationships and the stress, and they're just having a really hard time.
Yeah.
It sounds like mediation would be something that's an option for them.
It is helpful. The thing about mediation as well is there's lots of different processes, because we talked about catching evictions upstream. And I always, say this in every single presentation, catching it before the filing is obviously the best way to go. Trying to get, as Jeff said, pay it early if you have the notice. If you have the means or the ability to get into some rental assistance, get there, try and resolve. But in the instance that it goes to the next step, which would be the court process, that court process is actually you know, obviously where mediation still can take place, but it looks different.
Okay.
So just understanding the different parts that mediation can serve, it's helpful, but I don't think anything's, I mean, as I always say, everything's figure outable. No, so that's my quote phrase.
Okay, that sounds, I mean, that sounds better.
Yeah.
Then, you know, I mean, you're there to help them before or when they're into the court system, right? Hopefully
Right.
before.
Hopefully
mediation.
before, and that's kind of the whole thing with this, with COVID and all the information that everybody's getting with how to file an answer, how to get rental assistance,
Yes.
where are my resources. That's really why we're here. And so I think understanding your resources and understanding how to let your landlord know that resources are there, like I'm actually in with case management, or I am working with a mediator, or I do have an attorney. It does stall, or it does help to assist with retaining that housing and not having to mobilize. So that's really what it comes down to.
Okay, wonderful. I'm looking actually at what you have on the screen, rental and housing assistance. And that actually goes into the next question, at least part of it. Who is eligible for the services and resources from Utah Community Action?
So short of making my response at least a good 25-minute long speech, the main people that can determine it. I know that there's like some criteria right there as far as maximum income households. A lot of that flexes because if anybody's familiar with any community action programs, including ours, there's grants that always, even prior to COVID, pre-COVID, was helping folks with rental assistance or deposit. And so there's qualifications for income depending on the household. But now, especially with COVID and unemployment, pandemic unemployment, crisis, loss of wages, any kind of COVID affected type of emergency, it's different. I'm not the right one to give every single qualification because there's always a gray area. So my best advice would be to go back to that number that we gave, and 211 will give you the same thing, but it's that 801-359-2444. Number one, they're going to be able to qualify to determine what potential grant or what potential grants, there's usually multiple, that can assist you, and they'll schedule the appointment accordingly with the right case manager that can help you to get where you need to be. So
when in doubt, call you guys. That's the best thing to do, right?
It's definitely one of the first things you should do, because if there is qualifications or any kind of resources that can assist and step in at any juncture, why not try? I mean, it's really something that you just need to at least examine to see if you even, if not, you don't know, and then you end up moving out when you get a notice for a reason that maybe you didn't have to. So it's worth the exploration of that. Yeah.
Wonderful. And then the last question, and you touched on this earlier. You know, who can I contact outside of the Wasatch Front or Salt Lake County? I think you talked about it. Would that still be 211 again?
I would always call 211, to be right honest with you, because number one, whether it's rental assistance or it could be food or it could be anything, it could be childcare, it could be anything, legal services in general. 211 is going to be the overall resource. But as far as these grant resources for rental assistance to try and get help, a lot of the community actions throughout the state of Utah have received these emergency funds for the pandemic. So I would definitely start there after or during the time when you call 211. They're going to be the first starting point to lead you where you need to be. And then just to kind of finish out, as far as the mediation part goes, I know that was the last question. I can't stress it enough, whether you're working with someone like Jeff, whether you're working with a self-help center, whether you're trying to file it, do it on your own, whatever it looks like that you're trying to work through with eviction, just know that it's fast. It's very expedited. You need to make sure that you're communicating as early and as often, and document every single form of communication, text messages, emails, every single thing that you can do to protect yourself. Jeff stressed it as well, making sure that you file the answer in the instance that you don't, or whether you have a defense or you don't, just always answer and respond to any kind of court notice, because long run, it actually will serve you better to not have those judgments against you if you can possibly have a defense. So again, my three things: communicate and document everything, and cooperate with any arrangement makes everybody that's also trying to assist you, it makes it a lot easier for everyone to try and get in the situation and assist you the best way we possibly can.
Thank you so much, Heather. I mean,
Thank
you
you.
have given us a lot of great information that I think any of us may know someone in our family or in our community that will benefit from what we have heard from you and our other panelists. Now, we have several questions for the three of you. And by all means, just go ahead, and whoever wants to take the question can go ahead and answer them. The first question is, what are your thoughts? Why do you think evictions are so high right now at this time?
So I can talk to that a little bit. I think evictions are high right now. One, the elephant in the room is COVID, right? It just impacted everyone so much. People are either underemployed or not employed. And during this period of time where the federal laws were sort of protecting people from eviction, people would enter into deferral agreements, and now they have, possibly a rental situation where, the fair market value of that rent probably doesn't represent what they're going to be paying for it under those deferral agreements. So people are paying more for their for the same apartment that they had previously, and it just becomes difficult to afford. Plus, with the end of federal and state protections on evictions, it's inevitable that we're going to see more happening as people are just not returning to work at the same rate that they were pre-COVID. But that's sort of how we've seen it with people's legal aid, that there's just agreements that have happened that have possibly not been favorable for the tenants.
So with that, Jeff, I think it would be really important that people use some of the resources and phone numbers that we have been given during this town hall. And, when in doubt, keep asking questions and find resources before you are really into a difficult spot. What about if somebody wants to advocate for themselves when it comes to addiction or eviction or debt collection processes? Maybe I'll turn to Mr. Player with the self-help so he can touch on those resources there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So if somebody wants to represent themselves in court, they have every right. Actually, the Utah Constitution specifically says that you can represent yourself in court, and the Self-Help Center can help you do that. We can orient somebody to make sure they understand what their case is about, what the issues are, what the processes are, what the deadlines are. We can make sure they understand all that and connect them with resources. We can't help with every single thing, but for an eviction case and a debt collection case, we definitely understand those issues and have lots of resources to help. And again, all of our resources are free.
Thank you so much. Do you mind sharing with us again the phone number and maybe the URL that people can access?
Yeah, the URL is www.utcourts.gov. And the phone number to call the Self-Help Center is 888-683-0009.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that information. We have two more questions, and one of them is basically what happens when, what kind of tips and resources are there for undocumented or mixed status families experiencing evictions or debt collection enforcement?
So there are a lot of resources actually right now. The Self-Help Center can help people all the forms that are submitted to court have to be in English, but I know they have multilingual attorneys that can sort of guide you through how to access those forms. Also, Utah Legal Services and People's Legal Aid also have availability to help folks that don't speak English to be able to understand the forms and also the process for how to file them. And personally, I think that the courts are a lot more accessible right now because there aren't sort of those barriers to going into court. You don't have to go through security. There's not like the, the sheriff's presence there. So I think it's actually a little bit more calming that you go to these hearings over the phone, where, the court's going to provide a translator for you, and really there's no risk of sort of intimidation, if that's a fear that some people have, of being like in front of a government agency. And I think right now, I saw in Heather's slides, and I know that the Self-Help Center also does this, people that are sort of mixed legal status and people that just don't have legal status here still have access to free resources, and all of the agencies are anxious to make sure that you're taken care of.
Thank you so much for that answer. And I do appreciate you discussing that people have the opportunity to actually do hearings now over the phone, given that we've been going through a pandemic. So thank you so much for mentioning that. And lastly, I think people would like to know how they can follow up with the speakers, get additional information. My understanding is, and maybe Claudia can clarify this and the closing remarks, is that everything is going to be provided at the end, all the phone numbers and links that were mentioned during this presentation. So thank you, everyone. This has been an incredible experience in terms of learning, listening, and getting information about resources. I think any of us know someone or family members or people in our community that can benefit from these resources. And there was one comment that actually came through, and maybe before we close, someone can make, one of our panelists. We had Kay Myers, who said, "It may be worth noting that the court will now enter a judgment in an occupancy hearing." I don't know if anyone has any comments about that, but that came from the audience, and I don't want to ignore people that have been listening to this virtual town hall. Go ahead.
The law specifically allows for the court to make a judgment ruling if the merits have been presented before them in the occupancy hearing. However, in my experience, that's right. It's just not that common. The one thing that I would caution you on is if the renter is not participating in the lawsuit, so that if they haven't responded, it's very likely that the judge could enter a judgment as prayed for in the complaint, which is what the plaintiff's attorneys usually say, which basically means that the complaint has to state some costs and some impacts of the case, and the judges can and do enter judgments at the occupancy hearing, especially if someone doesn't show up.
Okay.
And I just wanted to add something real fast on that, because aside from the judgments there or not being there, the thing is once it's filed with the court, in the instance that you do get that summons and complaint, again being mandatory and just absolutely crucial to do the answer to those summonses, it is filed against you at that point. So in the instance that you're trying to rehouse, potentially move, even if it's not a judgment yet, it's still showing as a court filing against you. So it will show up, whether it's not even on your credit yet, but it will show up through other rental agencies that use certain companies to find out if you have filed evictions or eviction judgments against you. So just know, once it's to that point, regardless of whether it's a judgment or not, it's still going to be present to where you're going to have that barrier. And it's easier to actually try to avoid the filing in general rather than trying to explain the filing at the time of judgment. So I just wanted to add that because there is two separate processes, but they're very similar.
Thank you so much with that. Thank you again to our panelists, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to be part of this virtual town hall. I'm going to turn the time to Jeff Fata with the Utah State Courts and Claudia Loisa with the Division of Multicultural Affairs to conclude our virtual town hall tonight. And thank you again for listening to this great panelist.
Thank you, Lorena, for hosting this panel. My name is Jeffrey Fatah. I'm the Communication Director for the Utah State Court System. And first, on behalf of the courts, I want to thank everybody who participated and who's been listening in on this presentation. This is a very important topic, and we want to make sure that we get the information out to those who need it. Please note that this presentation and then the previous presentation in Spanish are recorded on Facebook Live. Multicultural Affairs, as well as the Utah State Courts, will be making that video available on their social media accounts. So please share this information with the people that you believe that need the help. I want to thank also the People's Legal Aid, as well as Utah Community Action for participating in this panel. During the pandemic, we're trying to find new ways, I think everybody is, to stay connected. And we want to let people know that the Utah courts are still here to help and here to serve, and we are shifting a lot of our services online. You can still contact us through telephone and email, and in any sort of, if there's any sort of bright lining to the situation that we are in, we are accepting filings by email a lot, and you can pick up the phone and call us. If you go to, again, utcourts.gov, we will find somebody that can help you. Now I just want to turn the remainder of the time over to Claudia with the Utah Division of Multicultural Affairs. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeff and Lorena, for those words. Good evening, everyone. I want to begin first by thanking the many partners and echoing Jeff's words as well, who made tonight's event possible. So thank you to the Division of Multicultural Affairs, who I represent, the Utah State Courts, People's Legal Aid, Utah Community Action, the Inclusiva Collective, and the Multicultural Advisory Committee for the state of Utah's COVID-19 response. This has really been a huge service to better understand the available resources related to evictions and debt collection. To Ms. Lorena, our brilliant moderator, we greatly appreciate your talent and care in facilitating tonight's conversation. And we're so thankful to our panelists, Nathaniel Player, Heather Lester, and Jeff Daybell, for providing thoughtful and much needed guidance on how to access these legal resources when facing evictions and debt collections. I also want to thank our Division Director, Nubia Peña, Maya Cardoso, Ramya Ahmed, Jenny Howe, and Dr. Joel Aviso Zavala, members of our division who do so very much to support and ensure that these events are coordinated. I also want to thank and acknowledge Jeff Fatah, especially from the Utah State Courts, who collaborated and invited us to partner on tonight's experience. Lastly, to our audience, we especially thank you for joining us this evening as we navigate the immediate and urgent conversation of legal resources as people are facing evictions and need this access to trusted legal assistance. So we invite you to visit our website often, which is multicultural.utah.gov. And like Jeff mentioned, we will have the recording on our Facebook page as well as our website. And we update the information on our Facebook page and other social media accounts daily and have culturally relevant resources highlighted. So in closing, we hope you join us again during next week's town hall focused on protective orders to keep you and your loved ones safe in the face of increased harm in the home. We hope to find these conversations helpful, and we look forward to bringing relevant and timely topics to our community as we navigate these challenging times together. Thank you again for your support and for tuning in. Good night, everyone.
Good night.